Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a flickering world of incense smoke and whispered Latin prayers. You're somewhere deep in the marble heart of Constantinople, and a single candle is dancing in a stone cell. Outside, the wind scrapes across tiled roofs like a restless soul, but here, in this tucked-away corner of the empire, a man kneels. He's old, or maybe just tired, his robe soaked at the hem, the scent of crushed basil on his fingertips, and ash smudged across his brow. He leans over a sick boy and says nothing. No ointment, no scalpel, no scroll of medical training. Only a prayer, only hope. And maybe that's where healing begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where and when you're listening from in the comments. I love seeing all the little lights across the world now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk the corridors of a Byzantine monastery, bare feet brushing over cold mosaic tiles. The air smells like cedar and dried figs. You hear a voice, low, steady, with that kind of warmth that makes you want to sit down and listen forever. It's not telling you to fear God, or to confess your sins. It's just whispering, stories. There are no needles here, no shiny scalpels or steaming cloths. The healers in this place wear no white coats, only simple robes, patched and stained with lavender oil and years of use. They're called the Anargyroi, the Unmercenaries, physicians who asked for no coin, who never sent a bill. Their currency, faith. Byzantium doesn't yet know how much it needs them. Not when this story begins. You're in a small side chapel, where candles form constellations in the dark. A boy coughs on a stone cot, his face pale as bone. Juiced beside him. A man hums softly, a hymn, maybe, or just a lullaby. He dips a sprig of myrtle in a wooden bowl, the water infused with honey and ash. Then he touches the boy's chest and whispers the name of a saint. The boy breathes in again, and then peace. It's not flashy. There's no divine thunderclap, no halo of gold, just breath. That's all. And in the eyes of the Anargyroi, that's enough. They believed healing wasn't something you owned. It wasn't taught in marble lecture halls or bought with silk purses. It was given like bread to the hungry, like forgiveness. And it all started with two brothers, Cosmas and Damian. You'll meet them soon. Twin saints who became the patron shadows of every unmercenary healer who came after. But first, you need to understand this monastery. It's not a hospital in the way we think of one. There's no admission desk, no waiting rooms. Instead, healing here feels like worship, like a secret ritual passed between generations who dared to mix medicine and miracles. At sunset, they gather, men and women, sometimes barefoot, always silent. Some of them carry herbs wrapped in linen, others, old clay vials of oil, pressed from olives grown on sacred hills. One woman brings a book, or what's left of it, just a few pages, ink smudged and prayer-stained, filled with drawings of roots and incantations. She hides it in her cloak. These pages aren't always welcome, not when healing treads too close to what the church calls sorcery, but the Unmercenaries, they walk that tightrope with grace. You follow one of them. His name might be Elias, or maybe something older. He doesn't speak much, only to pray. He tends to a man with a fever that won't break. The man's body is drenched in sweat, and his eyes flutter like the wings of a moth pinned to the wall. Elias doesn't panic. He brings mint and willow bark, not to fight the fever, but to cool the soul. He anoints the man's forehead with oil, and then he waits. Long hours. Just waits. It's strange how stillness feels like action. Here some say they were fools, that medicine without science is just superstition. But others, the ones who were healed, they'll tell you the stillness is what saved them. The way the healer never looked away. The way he believed, even when no one else did. And the records. Oh, they're full of stories. Some wild, some ridiculous, some that even the monks rolled their eyes at. Like the man who swore he was cured of blindness after eating a single fig blessed by an unmercenary. Or the woman whose broken leg mended after being rubbed with wine and whispered psalms. Historians still debate which ones are real, which ones were embellished. But then again, if you were dying in a world of war and plague, wouldn't you want to believe in miracles? You sit now in that monastery cell. The air is thick with incense and quiet hope. You see the candle flicker, the healer's hands move, and somewhere, deep inside, you feel something small and warm begin to glow. You're not dreaming though. It's starting to feel like one of those half-sleep moments, you know? Where the boundaries blur between what's real and what's whispered through time. The candle's flame from before is still flickering, but now it casts its light on two faces. Identical, serene. Eyes closed, not in sleep, but in prayer. Cosmas and Damian, you've heard of them, maybe just in passing. Saints, healers, but forget the gilded icons for a second. Picture this instead. Two brothers, born in the 3rd century, somewhere in the arid stretches of Syria, when Rome was still flexing its imperial muscle and Christians were just beginning to raise their heads. From the catacombs, their mother Theodosia was a devout believer, determined to raise them in faith and knowledge, like giving them armor for a world that didn't yet know how to deal with compassion without a price tag. The boys studied medicine not in grand academies, but in quiet corners with herb-worn hands and scrolls stained by time. They learned how to reset bones with splints made from olive branches, how to brew infusions that smelled like rosemary and soot, and they learned to heal without asking for a single copper coin. That's what made them different. That's what made them dangerous. Because in a world where doctors were often seen as merchants of suffering, the kind who charged more the sicker you were, Cosmas and Damian offered a radical alternative. Healing is grace, and people talked. They said the brothers cured everything from leprosy to migraines, and even stitched back together a man mauled by wild dogs, though. To be fair, Byzantine wild dogs were probably a lot more dramatic than actual dogs. One rumor claimed they once replaced a gangrenous leg with the limb of an Ethiopian man who had just died nearby. Not exactly your everyday surgical technique, but hey, desperate times. Historians still argue about that one. But the miracles, they piled up faster than fish at a Galilean feast. And soon Cosmas and Damian weren't just neighborhood healers, they were icons. Living saints walking through the dust of Syria, pulling people back from the brink with whispered prayers. And salves made of honey and ashdod, they refused money. Always people tried with gold, silk, goats. One man, desperate to thank them, left a ruby under their doorstep. The next day, they gave it away to a beggar with an infected foot. You couldn't bribe them, because they didn't see healing as something they did. They were just the vessels, the hands, the mouthpieces for something much larger, something eternal. You walk with them now, through a crowded street in Egypt, the sun sharp, the air thick with spice and sweat. A woman collapses by the well. Cosmas kneels, touching her wrist. No pulse. Damian closes his eyes. They don't panic. They don't shout. Instead, they pray. Not loudly, softly, as if the words are too sacred for noise. And then, she stirs. Now look, I get it. Maybe you're a skeptic. Maybe you think, this is all just myth with a side of incense. But try to remember, in a world where death came quickly and painfully, where medicine was more superstition than science, wouldn't you want to believe in someone like them? The Romans, though, they did in single quotes t, there's something threatening about people who heal without hierarchy. Cosmas and Damian didn't owe allegiance to any guild, any emperor, any pagan priesthood. They answered only to God, and in an empire obsessed with control that made them subversive. So, as the story goes, they were arrested, dragged in chains, before the Roman governor, Lysias, who demanded they recant their faith. Their refusal? Calm, polite. We serve the Lord who gives life and healing, they said. We cannot deny him for the favor of men. Cue the torture montage. Boiling oil, iron hooks, thrown into the sea, fire, lions, you name it. The empire tried it. And each time, they walked out unburned, unbroken, unafraid, like divine glitching in the imperial matrix. Eventually, they were beheaded, because apparently, Rome figured if you can't beat M chop M. But even death wasn't the end. You're in a candlelit basilica now. The year is centuries later, but their names are still whispered in the flicker. Pilgrims come with sore joints, fevers, plague boils, broken hearts. They bring vials of oil, pressed at dawn under silent prayer. They place them at the base of an icon, twin saints, one with a small box of herbs, the other with a vial of golden salve. Some leave healed, others leave simply, comforted, and you're not quite sure what to believe, but you feel the hush in your chest, like something sacred is brushing against the edges of your thoughts. You lean back, and the story continues. You're still awake, aren't you? Maybe your eyes are closed now, but your mind, it's wandering. Through incense-filled chapels, past flickering candlelight, and into the shadowy space where memory becomes myth. You're drifting with the saints, with Cosmas and Damian, though tonight the road is less about blood and miracles, and more about seeds, and roots, and leaves. Because healing doesn't just happen on command. Not even for saints. You find yourself in a garden, but not the kind with tidy rows and white fences. No, this is wild, earthy, chaotic, in the way only nature knows how to be. You smell crushed mint, see olive trees hunched like old men, and crouched in the dirt, murmuring softly, are two men with sun-darkened skin and robes dusted in pollen. The twin saints again, Cosmas and Damian, but this time, they're not healing the sick. They're harvesting medicine. This isn't just about prayer. It's about preparation. See, most people forget that the early Christian healers were herbalists first. Before the incense and the stained glass, they were just people who knew how to coax healing from the natural world. They didn't have x-rays or antibiotics, but they had willow bark for pain, myrrh for infection, fig sap for warts, and wild garlic to drive out the fevers. The garden was their laboratory, and also their chapel. Every leaf was a liturgy, every root a kind of scripture. Some plants were simple to use. Chew this leaf, drink that tea. Others were more complicated, like the silphium plant, now extinct. People used to say it could cure almost anything. Inflammation, indigestion, heartbreak. Sadly, it was also apparently delicious, and humans did what humans do best. They loved it right into extinction. But back in the 3rd century, the twin saints still had plenty to work with. Mandrake, for example, a root that looked creepily like a human figure and was said to scream when pulled from the ground. Charming Cosmas used it sparingly, for pain relief. Damian preferred betony, good for headaches, and less likely to freak out the neighbors. You crouch with them now. You feel the loamy earth under your nails, the sticky scent of crushed chamomile on your fingers. Damian murmurs a prayer before cutting a stalk, not out of superstition, out of reverence. They believed the act of healing began the moment the plant was touched, that every part of the process from growing to gathering to giving was sacred. Some historians still debate whether Cosmas and Damian ever actually practiced in a formal clinic. There are no detailed blueprints, no preserved tools, just stories, scattered like seeds through the centuries. But some say they used clay jars to store infusions, and mixed their remedies in broad-leafed bowls, carved from olive wood. Others whisper of a single-room hut near the Euphrates, open at all hours, with a steady line of coughing, limping visitors. And yet, despite their fame, they never wrote a manual. No scrolls remain with their formulas. No neat Byzantine guide to free miraculous healthcare. Maybe they knew the real medicine wasn't just in the plants, it was in the presence, the gentleness, the belief that simply being there mattered. Hear a story, whispered by the wind through the garden's reeds. A child once brought her dying cat to the twins. The animal had been bitten by something, a snake, perhaps. She cradled it, sobbing, and begged them to help. Damian, so the tale goes, took a sprig of feverfew and whispered a prayer, then gently laid it on the cat's belly. No thunder, lightning, just a slow breath, a blink, and the cat stirred, mewing. Did that really happen? Well, the history books don't mention cats, but the people remembered. And memory, as you know, is its own kind of truth. You wander farther now, past the garden, into the stone corridors of an early Christian shelter. Low ceilings, soot walls, an oil lamp flickers above a table, where Cosmas is mixing a thick paste. Damian places a cool cloth on her brow, humming a low chant in Syriac, a song, not unlike a lullaby. Their medicine is not only physical, it's atmospheric. Tenderness itself is part of the cure. They were radical, not because of how they healed, but because of why they did. And this might be the strangest part. They never asked the sick what they could give, only what they needed. You pause. Let that settle in. In a world where everything had a price, especially healing, these two gave theirs freely, and not because they were wealthy or naive, but because they truly believed the body was sacred, that to mend it was a divine calling, not a business transaction. You return now to the edge of the garden. The herbs sway gently in the night wind. Somewhere, a nightingale sings, and you realize something. This was never about magic, it was about mercy. The night deepens, and with it, your awareness shifts. You're no longer simply observing, you're there. You feel it now. The hum of anticipation that settles over the town when illness arrives and no one knows why. It's the city of Aegea, dusty stone streets, whitewashed walls glowing softly. Under an early dawn haze, you walk through the alleys with the smell of bread and sickness mixing in the air. Strange, isn't it? How even suffering has a scent. It begins as chills, a sore throat, then comes the weakness, the coughing, and for some sleep that drifts into silence. In a world without labs, without charts, they walk, on foot, sandals worn to the sole, satchels over their shoulders, filled not with gold but with dried herbs, linen cloths, and small glass vials that clink like whispered prayers. Cosmas listens first. He kneels beside a woman too weak to speak, placing 2 fingers at her throat. He doesn't ask her how much money she has, doesn't demand her name, he just listens. To her breath, to her pulse, as if the body itself could confess. Damian begins to boil water. Now, pause here for a second. Boiling water, simple, right? But in 3rd century Syria, that alone could mean the difference between life and death. They didn't know about bacteria, not in the way we do now, but somehow, they knew enough. Knew that heat purified, knew to wash hands, knew to avoid reusing cloths on different patients. Some call it intuition, others divine guidance, and historians, well, they're still arguing about it, whether their practices were taught or inspired, whether Cosmas and Damian were trained by Greek physicians or learned everything from their mother, Theodosia. The records are vague, but the outcomes, hard to ignore. You see the change in the village within hours. Mothers open shutters, children run to fetch water. One elderly man who was ghost-paled the day before now leans on a cane, muttering about how the tea tastes like wet bark but works like the sword of Michael himself. Was it the feverfew, the holy oil, the soothing words of Cosmas? Maybe all of it, or maybe just the kindness, which, as you're starting to understand, is its own form of medicine. Then comes the challenge. A nobleman, rich and resplendent in gold-threaded robes, sends for them. His daughter, the one with lashes long enough to shade her cheeks, has fallen ill. No one else has helped. He offers them a fortune to come. They do, but not because of the fortune. They arrive with the same satchels, the same sandals, the same soft presents. And when the nobleman tries to push a purse of silver into Damian's hands after the girls, fever breaks, something odd happens. Damian says no, flat dash out. No hesitation. The nobleman insists. At least take a gift, he says, for your trouble. But the trouble, Damian replies, was never the point. Cosmas, however, is quiet. Too quiet. That night, he pulls his brother aside. His brow is furrowed. He's worried. Because this Cosmas believed so fiercely in the purity of their mission. He feared even accepting a gift might compromise them, might taint the calling. What if they think we healed her for money? He whispers. Damian argues. I didn't ask. He gave it freely. That's not the same. And you, standing beside them in the moonlit alley, feel the tension. Two brothers, one soul, but two perspectives. Eventually, the story goes, Damian prays, asks for clarity, and a voice gentle, unmistakable, assures him that accepting generosity isn't the same as demanding payment. But guess what? Cosmas still wasn't convinced, and that little disagreement, it followed them for years. Not resentment, no. These were saints, not sitcom characters. But it was a tension, a quiet tug between purity and practicality, between the ideal and the real. Still, they kept healing, kept walking, kept showing up, even when Rome came knocking. Because, here's something wild, the empire had started to take notice, not just of their healing, but of the crowds, the loyalty, the growing movement of people who believed that Christ could work through calloused hands and bitter herbs. To the Roman mind, this wasn't just religion, it was politics. And politics. Always dangerous. But we're not there yet. Not tonight. Tonight you're back in the alley. The air is cooling, a cat darts across the stones. You hear someone laughing softly inside the nobleman's daughter, probably now fever-free, and you're left with this lingering image. Two men, refusing gold, walking into the shadows with nothing but faith and a handful of herbs, and somehow, you feel it, a warmth behind your eyes. The kind that comes not from miracle, but from mercy practiced without condition. You barely notice the shift now. It's like sleepwalking across time. The smell of salt air fades into cold marble. The distant cries of gulls give way to sandals clicking on mosaic floors. You're not in Aegea anymore. You're in the shadow of Antioch, and it's loud here. Vendors shout beneath colorful awnings. Children run with sticky hands full of figs. Soldiers patrol, chests puffed out like roosters in brass armor. And yet, in the center of all that noise, there's a hush. A current moving against the flow. You follow it. Down an alley. Past a baker's stall. Through an arch lined with chipped statues. And there, in the courtyard of a small domed church, you see them again, Cosmas and Damian, their backs to the crowd, faces turned upward. They're not healing today, they're teaching. Damian is crouched by a clay pot filled with dried herbs. He picks one up, something sharp, fragrant, and holds it out to a boy no older than 12. The boy squints at it, sniffs, wrinkles his nose. Bitterness means strength, Damian says with a grin. Cosmas chuckles and adds, but not everything bitter is medicine. Just ask anyone who's tried my brother's soup. A ripple of laughter, a lesson remembered. Here's what's surprising. They believed in passing knowledge on, not hoarding it, not hiding behind mystery or miracles. They taught anyone who asked, men, women, slaves, children. They didn't care about status. They cared about capacity. And some of what they taught was ahead of its time. They used vinegar to clean wounds, made poultices from crushed garlic, recommended fennel for digestion, mint for nausea, chamomile for fever, herbs you might now find in overpriced organic teas. They learned from the land. And from listening, here's a strange one. They swore by moldy bread for infected wounds. Sounds gross, right? But centuries later, science would call it penicillin. Back then, it was just faith in fungus. Now, remember when I said they weren't just healers but a movement? This is when it starts to show. You see them walking through Antioch, stopping to greet people by name, a potter with a limp, a widow with swollen joints, an apprentice too anxious to speak. The twins don't just fix broken bodies. They remember them. And that remembering is what turns followers into family. But not everyone is thrilled. You hear whispers from temple priests, from guild leaders, from men who sell charms and copper amulets promising protection from sickness. Their business is fading. Why buy a trinket when someone will heal you for free? Why fear the gods when two brothers in sandals offer mercy without sacrifice? And then there's the man in the robes. He's not flashy. His beard is neat, trimmed to perfection. His hands are soft, manicured, but his eyes calculating. This is Lysias, Roman proconsul. You don't know much about him yet, but you feel it, that cold edge in his smile. The way his fingers twitch when people mention the Christians. The empire's gears are turning, but you can't focus on that right now, because in a tiny room just off the street, a woman clutches her child, fevered, trembling. And when the door opens and Cosmas steps inside, she doesn't cry for help, she just breathes out. Thank God. Damian kneels beside her, checking the child's forehead. It's hot, too hot. The room smells of sour milk and worry. Cosmas opens the satchel. You see them work like they've done 1,000 times before. One soaking cloth in vinegar, the other grinding bark into powder. They speak little, just glances, nods. The child coughs. Damian presses a cool cloth to her head and whispers a prayer, not a loud one, not for show, just a quiet hum, like a lullaby murmured between breaths. And you feel something strange. Not drama. Not magic, just peace. As if healing is not an act of power, but of stillness. They leave the house as the sun dips low, painting the streets gold. You walk behind them, barefoot on warm stone. People nod, bow their heads. One man touches his heart as they pass. A movement has no banners here, no slogans. Just kindness repeated. Over and over, until even the cynical begin to hope. Asterisk, you wake too. Bells, not loud ones, not the clang of iron, but the gentle chime of bronze. Like someone shaking a handful of coins underwater. You open your eyes, and you're in a chapel. It's small, no bigger than your neighbor's garage. Incense curls through shafts of dusty sunlight. Icons line the walls, flat faces with huge eyes staring into eternity. You're not sure where the door is, but you don't need one because you're here too. Witness something rare. Cosmas and Damian aren't alone anymore. There's a third figure kneeling with them. She's older, wrapped in layers of woven blue. Her hands tremble. You see her mouth move, whispering something between sobs and song. This is Thecla, not the famous martyr, just a namesake. But in this moment, she is every grieving mother who's ever prayed for a miracle. Her son lies beside her, pale as wax. His chest barely rises. A fever too strong, too stubborn. The doctors, the official, Cosmas and Damian have not. And here's something no one tells you. Healing isn't always clean. It's not lightning from heaven, or hands glowing with divine light. Sometimes it's sweat, sometimes it's stubbornness. Sometimes it's a brother holding another brother's hand and muttering, again, try again. They do what they can. Cooling cloths, herbs that smell like burnt licorice, chanting prayers not from scrolls but from memory. And then, they stop. You feel it, the shift, the quiet that isn't silence, but something more like the moment between a question and an answer. And then the boy coughs. It's small, wet, but it's there, you see. Damian sagged, just a little relief melting down his spine. Cosmas squeezes his shoulder. Thecla starts to cry, louder now, but not from grief, from hope. Now, here's the twist. This boy, his name is Leontis. He will grow up to be a deacon. And one day, long after the twins are gone, he will tell this story to pilgrims gathered in shadowed cathedrals. Not because they cured me, he'll say, but because they stayed. That's the legacy, not just healing, but presence. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because just outside this quiet chapel, there's noise again, not the happy chaos of Antioch. Something heavier. A man with a limp limps no more. A widow swears her pain is gone. A beggar laughs like he hasn't in years. And someone, somewhere, doesn't like what they're hearing. Here's a fun fact. The Roman Empire had more laws about healing than you'd expect. You couldn't just walk around giving people medical help. You needed permission, approval, papers stamped with imperial seals. Cosmas and Damian had none. They didn't care, but someone else did. Enter Lysias again. This time he's not watching from a balcony. He's seated in his marble hall, sipping watered wine, listening to reports. His scribe reads from a scroll with practiced boredom. Free treatment. Citizens abandoning the temple of Asclepius, increasing Christian gatherings in marketplaces. Lysias frowns, not because of heresy, because of disruption. He's not a villain twirling a mustache. He's worse, a bureaucrat, with power and a budget to defend. The empire doesn't like free anything, free healing. That's subversion. So he sends the first letter, a polite request for Cosmas and Damian to appear before him for a discussion. They ignore it. A second letter arrives. This time it's not so polite. Meanwhile, you follow the twins to a tiny fishing village south of Antioch. Salt clings to everything. The sea is loud here, not poetic, just noisy. A boy has stepped on a fish spine. His foot swells. The nearest physician is a 2-day walk. But Cosmas is already boiling water. They work in a hut that smells like old nets and mildew. Outside, a goat sneezes. Damian turns to you, or maybe it feels like he does, and says, it's not glamorous, but neither is mercy. Later that night, the village gathers to thank them. An old man offers a bundle of fish. Another gives them dried dates. The twins take none of it. You're starting to notice the pattern. That's what unmercenary really means. No gold, no bribes, no bargaining, just service. For its own sake. And sure, it sounds saintly now. But back then, that kind of refusal offended everybody. Doctors saw them as competition. Priests saw them as blasphemers. Officials saw them as troublemakers. You begin to wonder, how long can this last? You already know the answer, don't you? Still, tonight, in the lamplight of that fishing village, they smile, they laugh, they rest their backs against the wall, and drink warm water. Like it's wine. There is no fear in them yet, but the shadow is coming. You can almost feel it. Oh, you don't hear the knock. You feel it. 3 short thuds. Not on wood but on the inside of your ribs. You open your eyes, and once again, you're not where you were. The fishing village is gone. So is the smell of brine and herbs. Now, you're somewhere quieter, drier. Dust clings to your sandals. And the sun burns like a disapproving father. You're in Cilicia, a region of craggy hills and serious eyebrows. The kind of place where people keep grudges in clay jars, and Cosmas and Damian are finally in trouble. It started with another letter, but this one came with soldiers, not the chatty kind. The kind with dull bronze armor and spears that have seen too much sun. They take the twins without ceremony. No trials, no warning, just a charge. Sorcery. You might laugh. But back then, healing without license was a kind of magic, especially when it worked, especially when it defied Rome. You follow the soldiers not walking, just knowing, until you find yourself in a small fortress outside the city of Aegina. It smells like wet rope and hot iron. Lysias is waiting. He doesn't yell. That's not his style. He's calm like a man discussing property taxes or grain shipments. He offers the twins a deal. Abandon your faith, confess your tricks, return to the temples of Asclepius. We'll even give you positions. Official ones, robes, salary, prestige. In Cosmos, he smiles. Not the polite kind. Are you kidding me? Kind. We already serve the highest physician, he says. We have no need of Roman gods. Damian just nods. He's the quieter one, but his silence is heavy. It sinks into the stone floor. Lysias sighs. He gestures. You're not ready for what comes next. Because this isn't a courtroom. This is a spectacle. The twins are dragged outside. A small crowd has gathered, locals, soldiers, a goat that's clearly not impressed. A stake has been planted. Ropes appear. You watch, helpless, as Cosmas is bound first, his arms stretched, his head tilted toward the sky like he's trying to listen to something you can't hear. Then Damian, the sentence is clear. Burn them. Now here's the part that no one agrees on. Some say the fire refused to touch them. Others say the ropes burned but left their skin untouched. One version claims the flames roared backwards, like a lion shamed by its own roar. You don't know the truth, but you do know this. They did not die. Not that day. And that's what makes Lysias nervous, because power doesn't like failure. And Rome really doesn't like loose ends, so he tries again. This time, drowning. They're thrown into the sea, bound to millstones. It's not poetic, just cold and heavy and final, except it's not final, because again they survive. Fishermen pull them out the next morning, muttering prayers they hadn't used in years. You wonder, is it divine intervention, or just dumb Roman knots? Some historians still argue over this. Maybe the twins escaped. Maybe the drowning never happened. Maybe it's just metaphor, but if it is a metaphor, it's a powerful one. You don't drown mercy, you don't burn compassion. Can chain a healer, but you can't unheal a wound once it's closed. Back in Aegina, Lysias is not sleeping well. He's writing more letters. Not to the twins, to Rome. Two men with more authority. Two people who wear purple and carry titles. Like proconsul of Asia. He wants permission. He wants permission to escalate. Meanwhile, Cosmas and Damian are imprisoned again. But here's the strange part. Even in chains, they're still healing. A guard with a bad knee. He walks better after they speak with him. A woman. With fever in the cells, they whisper psalms through the bars. You sit in the dark with them one night. The cell smells like sweat and old leather. Damian is humming something, a lullaby. Maybe. Cosmas turns to you and says, pain is temporary, but kindness echoes. And just like that, the air feels a little less heavy. There's a story, probably apocryphal, that the Roman jailer begged them for advice on his toothache, and that Cosmas' hands still chained, told him to chew on hyssop leaves and pray 3 times facing west. It worked. No one knows if that story is true, but you wish it were, because it feels like them. You feel it before you see it. The quiet, unnatural hush of a city holding its breath. You're still trailing the strange, stubborn wake of Cosmas and Damian, but something's changed. You sense it in the air, like the moment before a summer storm. The twins are no longer healers in the shadows. They are symbols now. Bright, dangerous, symbols that Rome can't afford to ignore. And Rome has a solution for that. It begins with a letter, one that Lysias doesn't even seal with wax. That's how urgent it is. A message sent north, to Emperor Carinus himself. You're not supposed to be in the emperor's chamber, but since when has that stopped you? The place is opulent, but cold. Carinus wears wealth like armor, golden cuffs, lapis in his belt, sandals too clean for a man who claims to rule the world. His advisors read the charges aloud. Public blasphemy, superstition, defiance of state religion. The usual Carinus doesn't flinch. He's not interested in theology. He's interested in control. These twins, he says, almost to himself, they gather followers. Yes, sire. They perform acts that the public deems miraculous. Yes, sire. He taps the marble floor with a finger. Then they're not physicians. They're rebels in disguise. You want to argue, but you can't. You're just watching. Just there. The order goes out. No more trials. No more flaming stakes or dramatic rescues. This time, it's to be clean, quiet, final. Back in Aegina, the soldiers arrive again. But something unexpected happens. A physician, one of their own, betrays them. His name was Antmis, or maybe the sources disagree. What they do agree on is this. He was once a friend, maybe even a former student, and he was jealous. That's the twist no one talks about. It wasn't always about politics. Sometimes it was about ego. You're not sure what, he told the authorities. Only that it sealed their fate. Cosmas and Damian are taken, once more, into custody. But this time, there's no audience. No crowd. They are dragged to a dry ravine outside the city. The kind of place that never makes it into paintings. Low shrubs. Cracked earth. Two executioners who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. No ceremony, just a sword. And yet, they kneel. They don't fight. Don't speak. Don't curse the emperor, or plead with heaven. They kneel, as if in prayer. As if they've always known it would end like this. And then it's done. You feel it in your chest, a soft rupture. Like a page turning in a book you love too much. Their bodies are left there, unmarked. No tomb, no inscription. But of course, that's not where the story ends, because something strange happens. Animals, yes, animals begin to gather around the site. Dogs, sheep, even a lion from a traveling menagerie. They stand vigil, refuse to leave. A shepherd swears he saw birds drop herbs onto the graves. People start talking. Whispers turn to visits. Visits become pilgrimages. And soon, the site is marked. First with a stone, then a cross. Then, years later, a small chapel, the first of many. Some say a healing spring burst forth nearby. Others claim it was just good timing with a forgotten. Well, historians of course still argue about all this. Did the emperor really order their execution? Was it a rogue commander? Did they die as martyrs, or simply vanish into legend? But the thing is, the impact remained. You're standing now in that same ravine. It's evening. The chapel is gone, eroded by centuries. But you can still feel the quiet hum of reverence in the stones. A boy walks past, barefoot, carrying a clay jug. He hums a tune you think you heard Damian sing once. And just like that, you realize memory isn't held in books or scrolls, it's held in people. You walk under a sky filled with dust and pilgrims. It's been years, maybe decades, since the ravine saw its quiet miracle, but something about it refuses to stay buried. Word has spread like ivy, curling its way across provinces, across mountains, and now, here in Syria, in the soft cradle of the desert wind, Cosmas and Damian have become ... legendary ... not saints. Not yet, but something close. You arrive in a town called Syris. It's small, sun-bleached, crumbling at the edges like an old letter, and it is buzzing. Because this is where the relics are said to be. Not all of them, of course. You can't just keep saints in a single box. These relics have a strange way of multiplying: an arm here, a tooth there, a strand of beard that may or may not be goat hair. But Cyrus claims the most important part: their skulls. The skulls are kept in a church built on the bones of a Roman temple. There's irony in that. You wonder if the old gods ever feel displaced. Inside the church, it's dim and gold and whispery. The bones are encased in glass and silver, resting on embroidered cushions. You watch people line up, hunched women, soldiers with old wounds, children with eyes too big for their faces. Each one believes the same thing. If they touch the glass, really touch it, something might happen, and sometimes it does. There's a man with a withered arm. He presses his forehead to the relics and murmurs something about his son. You blink, and the hand moves. No one screams. No one claps. They just nod, as if miracles were as ordinary as bread. The clergy, though they're less subtle, they're building shrines now, writing prayers, naming feast days. They call them the Anargyroi, the Unmercenaries. Doctors who charged nothing. Saints who healed through herbs, faith, and a stubborn refusal to obey imperial logic. And the name sticks. Soon, the cult of Cosmas and Damian grows roots. People paint their images on tiles and hang them in kitchens. Sailors whisper their names during storms. Pregnant women sleep with their icons under the pillow. A monastery opens, then another, and another. But here's the twist. They start being reported in two places at once. Syria claims them, but so does Constantinople. You feel at first as a kind of double vision: two cities, two stories, same names. In Constantinople, under the rule of Emperor Justinian, yes, that Justinian, a great plague is sweeping the empire. The emperor falls deathly ill, though no one knows what to do, until, allegedly, Cosmas and Damian appear. Justinian sees them in a fever dream, two figures in white, placing herbs on his chest, whispering in tongues older than Latin. He wakes, he breathes, he lives. And just like that, the emperor is sold. He builds a basilica in their honor, a big one. Marble floors, golden mosaics, a dome painted with stars so real you half expect them to move. It's not just a church, it's a declaration. The twins are no longer provincial ghosts, they're imperial saints, of course. Historians argue about all of this. Did Justinian really see them? Was it a later addition by hagiographers trying to secure funding for the church? Was the plague real? Was the healing real? But none of that matters to you. Standing now in the echoing nave of the basilica centuries before it will be lost to fire, conquest, and time, you trace your fingers along a marble pillar and wonder how something built on bones can feel so alive. A woman lights a candle beside you. She doesn't look at you, but she says softly, "They came for my sister once. In a dream?" You nod. Because by now, You've stopped needing proof. You just listen. Asterisk, you're in a kitchen now. The kind with clay floors and copper pots. And a smell that clings garlic, lentils, maybe thyme. There's a tile above the hearth. Faded, chipped, but unmistakable. 2 men in long robes, one holding a sprig of green. The other a small book, Cosmas and Damian. Again, because their image has traveled further than their bones ever did. And now, they live in kitchens, in bread ovens, in farmhouses miles away from any church. They've become household saints, the kind you pray to before stitching a wound. Or when the goat gives birth sideways. Or when your cousin won't stop coughing. Can't help but smile. They didn't start out this way. Back in the early centuries, saints were rare, wild things, martyrs, visionaries, cloaked in blood and legend. But Cosmas and Damian, they slipped into lives quietly, like good neighbors. Like someone who shows up with soup when you're sick. People love them for it. In Italy especially, their popularity explodes. You hear stories from Naples, from Rome, from little mountain villages with names that sound like lullabies. Each has their own version of the twins. In one story, they refuse to charge a rich merchant, and his money purse turns into a frog. In another, they cure a dying man with a stew made of basil, goat milk, and 3 Hail Marys. And then there's the big one, the one that makes you pause, the leg transplant. Yes, you heard that right. It's the story you never forget. A man's sources differ on who he was. But let's call him Justin. Has a diseased leg. Black, rotting, unfixable. He's asleep, or unconscious, or maybe just in the vague twilight of dying. And that's when Cosmas and Damian appear. In the story, they're calm, efficient, like surgeons with perfect bedside manner. They amputate the leg. And wait for it, they replace it. With the leg of an Ethiopian man who had just died and been buried in a nearby cemetery. You blink, this is not metaphor. They actually transplant the leg. Skin tone difference and all. When Justin wakes up, he sees a completely different leg. Longer, darker, healthier. His first thought is probably, wait, whose leg is this? Of course, art from the time doesn't shy away from showing this. You'll see medieval illustrations with a half-naked man on a bed. One pale leg, one dark, and 2 saints standing over him with the calm satisfaction of plumbers who've just fixed a leaking pipe. You can't help but laugh. It's such a strange image, but also weirdly beautiful, because it's about radical healing. About doing whatever it takes to save a life, even if it means digging up a grave. Historians still debate whether the story was meant literally or symbolically. Some say it was a metaphor for spiritual renewal. Others think it was propaganda, designed to show off the saints' powers to rival Islamic or Jewish healers. Some just shrug and say, well, medieval people were weird. You stand in front of one of the old paintings of the scene, a fresco, in a chapel that smells of mildew and candle wax. The saints' faces are serene. The patient looks mildly confused, and somehow, you feel peace. Because this isn't just about a leg, it's about hope. The desperate, strange, irrational kind of hope that keeps people praying even when logic says stop. Cosmas and Damian were never flashy. They didn't ride horses or carry swords. But they show up, in kitchens, in dreams, at the edge of death, with herbs in one hand and prayer in the other. And sometimes, with a shovel. You arrive in Rome under a violet dusk. The sun is slipping behind the domes and ruins, gilding the city in bronze. It's the 6th century, or maybe the 8th. Dates don't matter much anymore. You're following a story, and it leads you here. Because, in the heart of the Forum, where emperors once paraded, where gods were worshipped with blood and stone, something unexpected has taken root. A church. Not just any church. A church dedicated to Cosmas and Damian. It's small. At first glance, modest, but walk inside, and you're swallowed by color and gold. The Basilica Santi Cosma e Damiano feels like stepping inside an idea, a dream made out of light, and there they are, again, the saints. In mosaic looming above the apse like celestial physicians. They're tall, serene, surrounded by palm trees and lambs, and a river that flows from beneath their feet. Christ stands in the center, imperial, radiant, handing out crowns like diplomas. To the left and right, Cosmas and Damian, holding scrolls. Their eyes are black glass, they never blink. A priest tells you the basilica was repurposed from an old Roman building, the Temple of Romulus, son of Emperor Maxentius. The irony hits you like cold water. A temple to the son of a pagan emperor turned into a monument. Two Christian healers who defied emperors. The city, it seems, is good at recycling its ghosts. But this church, this one is different because here, the saints don't feel tucked away in legend or rural kitchens. They feel official. Like Rome itself has signed their contract, and it wasn't just the city. Pope Felix IV, or maybe it was Pope Gregory, made sure this basilica would carry their names through centuries. Later popes would expand it, adorn it, defend it against fire, flood, decay. Monks would chant their names in Latin rhythms. Plague victims would crawl here to die or be healed. Because in Rome, every brick has a prayer in it. You step forward. Beneath the APSE. The floor creaks, your shadow stretches toward the altar, where relics are said to be hidden beneath the marble. And for a moment, you feel them again. not just as saints, not even as doctors, but as symbols. Symbols of a world changing, of empires falling, and something stranger rising in their place, a world where religion doesn't just survive, it replaces power. The sword gives way to the icon. The emperor bows to the healer, and the future belongs not to those who conquer, but to those who care. You step back into the Rome twilight. The wind smells of figs and wet stone. Somewhere, bells ring. Asterisk, you stay in Italy a little longer. The basilica lingers in your mind, like a song you can't stop humming. But now, your steps pull you south, toward the ports, toward whispers of strange cargo, and even stranger cures. It's Naples. 7th century, and someone is brewing miracles. No, seriously brewing them. You find yourself in a narrow apothecary, packed tight with the smell of camphor and goat's milk soap. Shelves sag with ceramic jars, most labeled in Greek. Mortars are never still. Candles sputter. Outside donkeys clatter past on cobblestone. Inside, everything is alchemy. But this isn't your average potion shop, because the owner claims to follow the sacred teachings of Cosmas and Damian, and not just in spirit. He has their manuals. Yes, the legends say the saints left behind a set of healing instructions, passed from monk to monk, often in secret, recipes for balms, salves, and herbal concoctions laced with theology. You lean closer over one parchment. The ink is faded, but you can just make out the words. Use myrrh to soothe inflammation of the soul. Wait, soul, yup, in the saintly pharmacopoeia, spiritual and physical illness are the same thing. Fever, that's pride burning. Coughing, a refusal to speak truth. Festering wounds, bitterness unresolved. And so the medicines here are weirdly poetic. Rosewater for resentment, licorice for fear, olive oil, always olive oil, for nearly everything else. You see someone walk in, a fisherman with sunburn and a bleeding foot. The apothecary doesn't flinch. He bandages the wound with fig leaves soaked in vinegar, then gives him a few whispered prayers and a sprig of rosemary. The man leaves with a smile and a slight limp. You swear his eyes are clearer. Was it the herbs, or the hope? These followers of Cosmas and Damian, these unofficial, barefoot pharmacists, blur the line between medicine and miracle. They don't charge, they don't ask for loyalty. Some don't even ask your name, but they do ask one thing, that you believe healing is possible, that you meet them halfway, that you don't laugh at the fig leaf, because maybe, just maybe, that's how the saints want to reach you. One apothecary, an older woman with hennaed fingers, tells you this. They're not magic, they're memory. They remind us that care is older than power. You nod, you almost understand, and for a second, you want to stay here forever, in this warm room of vinegar and thyme. In a world where people believe prayers can smell like basil and cure a broken heart, but you have to keep moving. You always do. Asterisk by now. The saints have become shadows walking beside you, soft, sandal-footed, silent. They're not gone. They're everywhere. And tonight, you follow them east, to the deserts, to a place so quiet, it seems the sky itself has held its breath for 1,000 years. Welcome to Syria. The 8th century. This isn't the lush, leafy Byzantium of earlier tales. This is dust and stone, heat that shimmers like glass, winds that sound like old monks whispering to the cliffs, and in a cave. Yes, an actual cave. You meet him? He's just called the healer. No one seems to know his real name. He doesn't ask for food. He doesn't seem to sleep. But people come from hundreds of miles just to lie in the shade of his wall and wait. Because inside this stone hollow, something's happening, they say. He channels the old ways, the teachings of Cosmas and Damian, filtered through the silence of the desert. He does not use gold, silver, or silk. His robe is goat hair. His eyes are startlingly green. He smells like cedar and smoke, and his medicine, stillness. You watch him sit with a boy, twitching from fever, breathing ragged. The healer places a single hand on the boy's chest. He doesn't chant, doesn't whisper, just sits. 5 hours pass. You're about to fall asleep in the sand, when the boy suddenly gasps and curls to his side. Breathing normally, he's not healed. Not entirely, but something broke, and something left. Are not the only one watching. Behind you, a crowd of silent pilgrims sits in a crescent, none speaking, all waiting. Some hold dried herbs in leather pouches, others clutch copies of an old icon. The twin saints, one holding a spoon, the other a scroll. They believe the healer is a vessel, not a prophet, not a fraud, just an open window. No one gives orders here, no one is asked to convert. There are Muslims, Christians, and people who say nothing at all, but all of them believe in one thing, that healing is not earned, it's given, not like a paycheck, but like a breeze. The cave, you notice, is cool, despite the brutal heat. Outside, there's water here, somewhere, and the faint smell of lavender. Someone once wrote that the early desert Christians saw illness not as punishment but as a kind of teacher, and maybe that's what this man is, a student of pain, helping others with their homework. You sleep? By the wall that night, it's rough stone, full of etchings, crosses, half-faded prayers. One in Latin reads, Non medicus, sed manus Dei, not a doctor, but the hand of God. And as the wind rises again, and the moon turns silver behind the hills, You understand in some places medicine whispers, not shouts. The road out of the desert is never really behind you. Sand stays in your boots. Even weeks later, it's in your hair, your breath, your thoughts. But now, the air is cooler. You're in Cappadocia. Yes, that Cappadocia. The one with fairy chimneys that rise like candle wax, frozen mid-drip. The one where churches were carved into the earth, not built atop it. It's the 9th century. And if you're feeling like things are starting to quiet down, think again, because the empire is cracking. The iconoclast controversy has torn the church in two. Monasteries are being raided, icons are smashed, painted saints are erased, their eyes gouged out with knives, their halos scraped like mold. The saints you've been following, they're officially ... problematic, but you're about to meet one who doesn't care about controversies. Her name is Melania. She wears black. She speaks 5 languages. She has a voice like warm stone, and the posture of someone who stood through far worse than theological bickering. And she's a healer. Yes, a woman healer. In the middle of a storm that says only men can stand, between body and God, here she is, pressing fig poultices onto infected wounds, and whispering psalms under her breath. You follow her through tunnels lit by tiny flames in bowls of sheep fat. You pass women in labor, elders with coughs that sound like old trees creaking. Melania doesn't ask permission, she just acts. She breaks open bundles of lavender and ash bark. She hums as she cleans a festering cut on a soldier's leg. And here's the strange thing, she doesn't just treat pain, she teaches. You sit with her and a group of girls, barely teenagers, as she holds up a leaf of dried Hypericum perforatum, St. John's wort, and explains how it drives away darkness, not just in the body, but in the mind. A girl raises her hand. But how does the plant know where the darkness is? Melania smiles. It doesn't. You do? The plant just listens. Outside, soldiers scream. Icons are burned in the square. But down here, underground, there's order, learning light. You hear one of the younger girls recite a line of old Syriac scripture from memory. He makes the bitter herbs sweet. No one claps. There's no need. It's not a show. It's survival. One night you wake to shouting. The tunnels are flooding with smoke. An attack. Melania moves with eerie calm. She wraps a small satchel of herbs, thrusts it into your hand, and says, if they destroy what's written, remember what you've seen. Then, she disappears into the dark. Later, days later, you'll learn she escaped barefoot, with nothing but a blade of rosemary tucked behind her ear. You keep the satchel. You never open it. And even now, when you hold it, you still smell basil and old parchment. Asterisk, your boots are quieter now. The dust has settled behind you at least. For tonight, but something's changed. You feel it. You've been walking through centuries, through flames and prayers, bruises and miracles, through basil-scented cloisters and smoke-filled caves. And somehow, you're still here, still listening, still learning. You find yourself in Constantinople once more. Not the proud imperial city of golden domes and marble lions you first saw, but a quieter one. Softer, like a candle after the feast. It's the twilight of Byzantium. Doctors now wear silk robes and recite Galen in polished Greek. But in the poorer quarters, you still find them. The Unmercenaries. What began as legend has become lineage. You meet an old man named Stephanos. He has no title, no license, just a pouch of dried mint and a chipped bronze crucifix. He sits in the shade of a broken aqueduct and hums hymns while crushing herbs into a patient's tea. A widow with coughing fits, a sailor with wounds that smell of the sea. He doesn't ask for coin, he never does. I don't heal, he says, adjusting a faded cloak. I remind the body what God made it to do. You smile. Because you've heard that before? Down a different road, in a different mouth. You walk with Stephanos to a house, barely a house, more like a suggestion of walls. Inside, his daughter teaches a boy to grind myrrh into paste. The boy giggles. And right there, between the cough and the candlelight, you feel it, continuity. The unmercenary physicians are not an order, not a sect, not a name in a book, they are a choice. Over and over again, to offer what you have, expecting nothing. To heal with both hands, one holding time, the other a prayer. You remember Theoctistos and his trembling faith. You remember Cosmas and Damianos and their quiet resistance. You remember Melania, handing you that satchel, her voice urgent in the dark. You remember that no one ever introduced themselves as a holy healer. They just ... acted ... and now, standing here, watching Stephanos prepare a salve under a sky painted with Byzantine pinks and purples, you wonder ... if that's what you're becoming. too. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Leave a comment below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take one last walk, past ruined chapels, overrun by ivy, past fountains long dry but still carved with fish and angels. The wind is gentler now, smelling of myrrh and chamomile. You pass a boy crushing herbs, a girl whispering scripture, an old man humming something wordless but holy. And slowly, the story begins to blur. The sandals on your feet fade into the softness of your bed. The candlelight becomes the flicker of the street lamp outside. The voices hush, replaced by the steady rhythm of your breath. And all that remains is the memory of hands that healed. Not for glory, not for gold, but because they could, because someone was hurting, and because God, whether in basil or in breath, was always listening. You close your eyes, and somewhere, far away, a fig leaf stirs in the wind. End of script. Sweet dreams.